when I was 10 years old. My brother and sister they went to Penn State. So I feel like I'm part of the family, even though I did go to Penn State myself. 2 of the 5 siblings I did. So it feels good to be back. I left when I was 10 with a ton of Penn State gear, and I wore it all throughout my 5th grade. It's fantastic. So thanks for having us. We are Centerbrook Architects. We're about 65 people in Southeast Connecticut. So if you're looking for an office in the city, in Boston, New York, that's not us. And we don't want to do that. So we have an old mill building here in Centerbrook along a river. We pride ourselves in the building being powered by hydro, by solar, by geothermal, and we've recently installed this fish ladder, which flows up the side here, up to the top, and we bring K through 12 students here to kind of use it as a teaching tool. So students come to our office pretty much weekly to kind of participate in the different sustainable items we have here. We do work mostly in the United States, but we will talk about a project in Mexico. We've done work in China and Europe. And I'm thinking about Florida here. I hope all goes well for the people in Florida. We've done quite a few projects in Florida as well. We are an office of makers, of craftsmen. Marcus just gave us a tour of your fabulous studios, which is fantastic. And I think his lair downstairs where the fabrication occurs, which is really cool. That's something that you'll see in our work. We've got a wood shop, a maker lab on our site. You can see our craftsman here, Patrick, who's not an architect, he's just a master craftsman. He makes some of the light fixtures for our projects and the various things that we like to install projects. But we are, we're makers, but we like to have fun. So when our pond freezes, we skate on it, and it happens less and less these days, but so be it. This is special to us. So I'm going to present kind of Centerbrook through the lens of a couple architects. This one in particular, Charles Moore, actually started Centerbrook about 50 years ago. He's, to me, a great architectural thinker, very imaginative, and what allows him to do the great work, I think, that he's done is to he doesn't have limits, and he takes in a lot of information. And one of his quotes that I particularly like is that traditions lead to invention. So he's able to take all sorts of information from clients, from the site, and from history, and very special structures like this one that we recently went after on site here, the Palmer Museum of Art, which is up for renovation. Fujimori. So this is a Japanese historian. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this architect historian, but fantastic thinker. He will claim to go back to the Stone Age, referencing his work. But what he talks about is after the Bronze Age, the styles reflected the areas, the states, the cultures, the religions in which they belong. Then in the 20th century, things started to change. Things started to become more familiar as you travel to different regions, things start to look similar. And that's something that we're trying to not do. We're trying to insert ourselves into different communities and create distinct architecture for those specific communities, those people, and those places. I will say, if you look at the left, there's 2 different methodologies here that he developed in the 80s, and you can kind of look into yourself to see where you land, whether you look to the right in the more innovative, forward-thinking, or you look to the left, which might be more earthy, rituals, historic. I tend to lean left. You wouldn't want to fall in the middle here, because you kind of in the blend. But it's a good thing to read. I encourage you to read his work. Surprising to me, Koolhaas and OMA, when they did their 2014 Biennale, this struck me that the change from architecture post-Bronze Age, where everything looked different in different areas on the left side, to where things are starting to look homogeneous and monotonous on the right side. So that's the goal, is to create particular buildings for specific people and communities. I show these, you know, if you do kind of lean to the right, which is the more innovative, sometimes I feel they fall short. These aren't our buildings. These are, you know, typical glass buildings that you'll see anywhere, similar to the Pool House slide. What we try to do in our work is create museums for institutions, libraries for those particular places, where if you move them to a different area, they wouldn't fit, they wouldn't belong. A research in a railing town, education, sacred spaces. So that's the goal, and that's something we'll talk about today and how to do that. You want this?
Another reason that Justin and I have been interested in this is when we did our kind of thesis equivalent in graduate school, we had the opportunity to travel to India and go to Chandigarh, and it was really an illuminating trip. Before that, I would have thought of kind of these beautiful masterpieces of architecture, these really singular visions of buildings. And in addition to kind of the Capitol complex buildings that are so iconic, Corb also had these ideas about this utopian city that was based on a sector, an extremely formal development. And this map on the left shows kind of the nucleus of his sector plan and what's actually there now. And all of the triangles represent informal settlements that started to proliferate around the edges and periphery of that utopian city. And a lot of those villages started with the construction project of Chandigarh itself. So they started to populate and grow. And the scale of those is quite stark in contrast to the sector plan that he had laid out as kind of this architect with this vision, with really not much of a connection, I would say, to the way that the people actually design, build, and inhabit their spaces. And so the scale change and the formality and just the network of it is so different, so starkly different. And even looking at Google Earth images, seeing kind of the Capitol complex, the border of the city, and then all of this kind of fabric on the edges was something that was really striking, in that there can be such a disconnect between the way an architect kind of has a vision for a project and the way that people are actually going to build it, use it, and design it. So that's something that was struck us, and is something we've kind of taken forward into practice. So we're going to show you a handful of projects that look at kind of each of those phases, starting with design and the way that we try to engage with communities to find a place that really identifies what they're about and is their particulars.
We've got one microphone. You can go back and forth. We'll start with the first project. This is the Yale Peabody Museum. It's a natural history museum. So let's go through it. If there's one thing I'd like to impart today, is that as an architect, you are making quite a few decisions, but you are working with a very large team when you're working on a large project. It'd be fantastic if you could just design it all in back end and just deliver it to the site, maybe like Corb did back in the day. But you can see here, our team here with the consultants for this particular project, which we'll go through, and the community that is working on Yale's side is hundreds, if not thousands of people, and that's not even accounting for the construction. So when we start a project like this, you have to think about the communities that you're working with, the team that you're going to develop, that's going to deliver the project, the team that's going to actually build the project, the Peabody Museum, 250 plus people, that is asking you what, or telling you what needs they have in the project. So it does get up in the thousands for a project like this. So it's really your ability to take all that information and distill it down into something special is the challenge. Early on, we met with our consultants and the Peabody staff, and we scheduled out every single week for this project for 4 years. So you have to talk about what needs you're going to have, not only next week, in a year, in 18 months, and how those needs are going to be covered throughout the design process. I'll just run you through the project itself. This is the Peabody Museum here. It's about 100 years old. There's 2 research buildings next to it. There's a loading pavilion here and an empty parking lot, which is unheard of at Yale, which is a space that is incredibly valuable but underused. So our task was to fix the museum and the way that it had developed over 100 years and create a new 50,000 square foot plug in that kind of ship in the bottle space. So there's the addition. In the center point here, we created a new loading pavilion that brought all the dinosaurs and collection storage underground to the Peabody itself and the 2 research facilities next door. So this project is about a $160 million project that took me probably 7 years start to finish through a master plan completion. A rendering of the Peabody itself. So you can see our addition here, which has a daylit space, a central gallery, the main entrance. And one thing, talking to the K through 12 community school groups, because this is probably the most visited museum in New England. Hundreds of school groups go through this, through the summer season, through the fall season, and we created a separate entry for them. So that was one of the challenges and the needs that came up early. I can see the addition there. Talking about our mechanical team, fitting in hundreds and hundreds of yards of ductwork within an existing masonry building is a total challenge. That's all new ductwork, all new steel. And these are all modeled in 3D and coordinated through Revit. The challenge here sustainably is to take a 100-year-old building that uses probably 150 UI, energy usage index efficiency, and to cut it in half. So it's not a one strategy fits all for our projects. In this particular project, what we found the most savings is a wall retrofit, where we entered probes into the wall to develop different water strategies of where this wall is going to freeze and fall. And that's something we did over 18 months. You can see the probes here, warm inside, cold outside. When you add insulation, I know I'm getting technical here. When you add insulation to the inside, the brick freezes. So 100-year-old brick, freezing solid, doesn't like that. So you have to understand what this makeup's going to be so that this doesn't fall. Just one detail on how to meet those energy efficiencies and cut the energy in half from 150 to 75. The design itself, for Centerbrook, to create something that has new glazing for the existing building, but to create, one of the demands here for us was, and as Yale students, we happened to visit the Peabody Museum when we were there, but most Yale students, and I hope you guys go to your art museums, I know you have a new one coming, but most students don't visit this. So what we did here, and the idea was to integrate classrooms into this building and to create an entirely new entry that was appropriate and a fit for Yale students. So that's what we see here to the north. That's what you see here, where Yale students can come in now. It's on the registrar, it's on the curriculum. They have courses here where they enter and walk through the dinosaurs and enjoy the museum. Another way we met the energy loads is to redo all of the exterior glazing with bird thread, because the building across the street is entirely clear glaze. I'm looking at this one, which this is a migratory bird path in New Haven, and hundreds of birds would die from the building across the street. So we have a horizontal thread in this building. Another view of the Yale entry. A little thing to note, if you have a donor that gives $160 million, you have to honor him. He's from Texas, so that's a bovid, it's an ancient bovid longhorn that is mounted on there. The interior was all redone. working with an exhibit designer and a designer that reposes all of the fossils. A lighting designer that's able to, you know, for K through 12s, if they have sleepovers here, to simulate different lighting events, maybe the end of the dinosaurs. These relay lights were once an original piece to the museum. They were covered up on mechanical units. We then simulated daylight with artificial lights in this project. The new central gallery that sits within that plug that was the parking lot. A hard surface on the floor, a hard surface on the ceiling. So all this, it looks like stone, but it's acoustic plaster, so that this room feels really comfortable. I like this room. It's pretty good. Blue lamp timbers with a skylight above. And then making this museum feel welcoming for all ages. From the elderly to young students to K through 12. I just show this to show the classrooms that were sprinkled in throughout the plans. And creating special moments where, as you're going through, you can see these classrooms in action. So I'll get this to that. I will note that this is the bird thread, which is required so that birds don't run into the glass. But at certain moments, we brought in the theory of evolution here into the bird thread. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, the next project I wanted to share was actually two projects. We have had the opportunity to work on alumni buildings at the University of Virginia and Duke University. And alumni buildings are incredibly interesting just in terms of their requirements to appeal to people who aren't even students yet, to current students, and then alumni in perpetuity. So you have a lot of different age diversity. You have a lot of people with different feelings about nostalgia or things they're looking for, and really kind of balancing that connection to the place that they have fond memories of, but being forward-looking as well. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of compare them. So we'll look at them both in concert with one another. So both of these campuses have very dominant architectural styles and languages that they're operating within. One being Gothic, one being a more neoclassical vocabulary. And they have kind of in a historic kind of campus planning precedent as well. The Academical Village was what the University of Virginia's kind of core campus was called. It was a live-work environment, mixing of faculty and students. And then Campus and Forest at Duke University, really that kind of wonderful contrast between the Gothic and this kind of these gorgeous trees. So I will show you the UVA project first. So the UVA project is a 9-square plan. This is a cutaway of the first floor. So an alumni center in this instance is a lot of kind of hospitality and flexible event spaces, as well as being an office building. So on the first floor, we have this central atrium. The rotunda at UVA is obviously the iconic space with the oculus and everything. And so we were trying to harken back to that for kind of this internal mixing point. And then on the back side, we have 3 large event spaces that open up to an event terrace. And then in the dashed area, we have this kind of liminal in-between zone where there's porticos and colonnades. I'm sure you guys have that on this campus, where you kind of have those indoor-outdoor spaces that allow you to transition. And those are places that people really like to gravitate towards. And then upstairs is most of the office space. And then there's also porches on each side. So looking at the pavilions on the lawn for inspiration here as well for the scale of this. The building is in a residential area, so it was important that it was friendly to the neighbors in terms of scale. At Duke, it's the same pieces, but it's a different arrangement. They're arranged around an outdoor space, the central green in the middle where they'll put a tent up. There are some flexible event spaces, and then the offices are off in another building, kind of in this little complex. So again, if we look at those same pieces, we've got event spaces kind of spilling out with that in-between space, knitting them together. And then these are the pictures of kind of the street view or the primary view. So like a lot of campuses, the building has two faces. One that's kind of the pedestrian experience that you will see and be welcomed by. And then you'll have kind of another more formal entry that's if you were to ride by car, or if you were to be dropped off, you'd have a different experience. And something that was really important, particularly at UVA, was that the alumni hall felt more open and more approachable. The current alumni hall kind of feels like a big house on a hill, so it's very kind of imposing and not welcoming. So transparency and bringing glass in and having a feeling of warmth was very important. So these are the more formal entrances of each, where you would get dropped off and then you would come in to the main social gathering spaces. So in each instance, you can see we're kind of playing on some traditional architectural forms, but playing with the scale of them and trying to make it flexible so it feels reminiscent of the university, but also more forward thinking. The exteriors in both instances are more traditional, and then it becomes a little more modern inside. And the thought is that these could be lobby spaces, they could have a big party here, et cetera, be very flexible. And in addition to places for socialization, you also want quiet spaces so that people can have a conversation, or alumni who may be more comfortable in a more traditional format would have a parlor like you would see on the right there, where they could sit down and be greeted. And then meeting space is also an important part of an alumni center, both for their own kind of internal admin, but also as an amenity to the community around them for different organizations and for student groups as well. I should say that UVA these are all renderings. This is in construction documents right now, so it has not been built, whereas Duke is open. And this is the outdoor space that I was talking about. So at Duke, we've got this wood, the use of wood to harken back to the forest, and then they can put a tent in here for certain large events, and then the arcade becomes kind of this in-between or pre-function space. And then similarly at UVA, we have different scale kind of outdoor rooms. The goal in both was really to use modern building technology, but in a traditional kind of transitional way, so that it knits with the existing kind of historic fabric, but still feels modern and fresh and sustainable.
So we'll go from museums to alumni centers to residence. So at Centerbrook, you really could work on just about anything. This project, usually we just do full residences. We don't do, let me switch this. We don't do renovations. So full-scale residences. This one in particular is down in Mexico in Cabo San Lucas. It's actually, you can't tell from this map, but you can tell from this map, it's at one of the highest points in all of Cabo. It's a client that we've done a house for on Long Island, and moved to Cabo. So a unique project, a fun project, where we were able to travel to Cabo, kind of talk to some few initial builders, ingratiate ourselves into the community, understand the vernacular, because there's certain type of architecture that works here. A typical New England building or a New England house would not work here in terms of the construction wall makeup. So we had to figure that out before we started design. I'll just jump right to the model that we made initially. And what you'll notice and what I'll talk most about today is this canopy. So that is the piece that we felt connected most to the local vernacular in Cabo. in Mexico, and we also use that piece to anchor all of the programmatic components beneath it, residential components. This house is up very high, as you'll see some of the photos, but it's also on very steep slopes. So you use kind of that cut and fill. I'm sure some of your professors have talked about that cut and fill strategy, where it steps down. So you enter this house from the uppermost level up here, and you enter down to the kind of the more public quarters, the kitchen, the dining, the view, and then the lowest level is the bedrooms. So you work your way down the hill. We could have built a box here. We could have built a single level box, and it wouldn't have been appropriate to the area, and also I don't think it would be as special. After you arrive, the guests would come down these stairs, which you'll see here. And we painted the stairs as white with stucco so that they change color throughout the day. And artificially, as these illuminate, they change color as you come down at night. Almost similar to how the Peabody changes color, but not for dinosaurs. So there's an elegant change there at night for certain events. So you're coming down the stairs, entering into the dining, the kitchen. There's an outdoor terrace here that is covered by that canopy and a living space here. The lower level has multiple bedrooms and a larger suite for the owners of the residence. And we'll look at the pool. I hope all of you get to design an infinity pool as we become architects, because clients will push you to make it as special as possible. Fortunately, we have a great client here. The challenge that I saw, or the trick for me, was to extend it beyond these walls that you don't see the edges. So you'll see that picture in a moment. And I think it worked out pretty well. So here's the house. Our typical team that we would have put together for the engineering of this, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, we went to Cabo and found that team there because we wanted the building to operate and work well. And specifically the structure, which I'll talk about. We used a structural engineer from Cabo, which was fantastic. I'll show you some examples of where you see this in Cabo. It's this Latia system. Usually it's just wood. These members are steel in this case because they stand so far out. We modeled all this in 3D to get the curvature just right. And we cut it in the vertical plane so it goes in and out, but it also goes up and down in a gradual way that simulates the Pacific that you can see in the distance. You can see kind of a rough section here. We have much more detailed drawings, but anytime you cantilever something, you're going to want to embed it 2/3 inside. So there's these pipes, these steel pipes go into the waffle slab, 2/3 in, and then they come out, and this distance changes as well as the distance of the member itself. Being there on site during construction was especially critical to make sure that we got this right. Not necessarily the pour for the rebar, but the location of these, the height, the distance of them coming out, and also the shade pattern that is coming out. So quite this is the Pacific Ocean here. So on windy days, you can't really tell how windy it was up here on site. But you're falling 40 feet and there's no railings, and OSHA was not present that day. This is one of the images we saw while traveling through Cabo, and just inspiring us to kind of break down the light, breaking down the shade pattern down to 25%. It does get extremely hot there for most of the year. But yes, you can see as they step back. So the house itself is a large house, it's a large residence, but how to pull it all together was the challenge. And creating something that didn't obstruct the view. At one point, we had these turned down, we had them supported, But it took away, and the owner said, no, we don't want it. And you don't want support for these, so that was the challenge. As I mentioned before, the infinity pool, so we've got large slabs of flooring here that we built, so, you know, reference the shade or the color of the ocean during certain times of the day. We extended the pool past these two walls so that, and it takes a while to select the right finish inside the pool so that it disappears. So it was a challenge, and I wish you luck. Pool manufacturers, they'll go back, your knife edge should go this way, or this way, this way, or this way, and they all, I couldn't tell you which one that they prefer. One is easier, so good luck when you get into the detail of that. I love this image because it shows the curvature of the roof, the flat of the ocean, the Pacific, and then Cabo itself as you look down onto it. Okay. Now to a church.
Great. So we have two more projects to share with you all. The first is a parish house, an event space that we designed on an urban site in Providence, Rhode Island. Grace Church came to us and they had that you see this kind of L-shaped slot next to the historic Richard Upjohn Church. And they said they wanted to build a building there. And you can see kind of the nondescript apartment building next door. And then you've got this kind of supermodel next to you. What do you put in there? And how do you engage their mission, which is having a space that both can be used after church services as a way for their parish to socialize, but also is an open door to the city where they have a lot of events that they host and things like that. So we started sketching and probably tested 10 or 15 different just massings and kind of expressive shapes. And we had all sorts of kind of winged roofs and things like that. And then we ended up with the gable and really thinking that expressing the facade and having some fun with that would be the ticket. So we ended up with this pavilion with a copper curtain wall facade. It's all one story inside, so it's open to the front. And then in this instance, you can see this is quite a busy street, that kind of the front yard was equally important. And it was balancing both security needs, but also wanting to still feel open, feeling like a community, so that it really fit with their mission of kind of being a church for everybody. They're a pretty progressive congregation. So this is the plan. You see kind of that gray area is that flexible event space. And then the back of house stuff is tucked behind so that caterers and things like that can access from the back street. And obviously, how do we connect to the existing sanctuary in a delicate way? And we decided that we would do it just as light as possible. So we chose one bay to engage with. And so there's a slot of exterior space between the two. So that when you're inside of the pavilion, you can kind of see the beauty of the church, and it becomes kind of this wallpaper of weather and history and these gorgeous stained glass windows. It's quite a dynamic experience. And in terms of kind of the special detailing or the motifs that we were looking at, taking off of the arches, both for the ceiling treatment with an acoustic treatment, as well as on the facade. Because the goal for this was for it to feel somewhat sacred, but also very flexible and non-secular, so that it could be used for a variety of different activities. And the space in front of it has really become a wonderful, wonderfully scaled kind of outdoor room that there can be flow in between both the sanctuary into the event hall and then right out onto the street. And so it works well for a large group, but also is great for just a handful of people that either have to kind of get the wiggles out during the service, or they're doing a summer camp, or it's just people enjoying the maze on a regular Saturday in the city.
Okay, one more project. A Discovery Center. And I'll say, with every project that we start, whether it's a museum, a church, a sacred space, or a residence, they all start with pretty large, maybe not the residents, but pretty large meetings where we're doing workshops with maybe 10 to 20 people. A museum on Monday I was meeting with was 15. So you're not designing with 2 or 3 people, you're designing with groups. And this project, especially being a park in Stanford, this project has a lot of user groups, from dog walkers to various park goers to the Nature Conservancy. So this involved many, many different user groups to design this building to the right. This is a rendering, an earlier rendering of the project. But that's to say that, again, you're taking in a lot of information. It's not just architectural information, detailing information. It's information from communities, from cultures, from the history of this site. And it's your role to kind of work with your team to output design. This project is especially sustainable in the way that it works, but that's not what I'm going to talk about today. It's more of the shape and the way that it reacts to the park itself. It sits within a larger setting. We work with really fantastic landscape architect team here, Stimson Architects, landscape architects. And people are moving and entering this park from a number of ways, whether it's from the north, from the west, from the south and the east. So we wanted this building to feel approachable, a building that you feel like you're not going to walk up to and the door's locked. Even if you walk up to this building and you approach it, you're still in a space that's on either side or either part of the building. We also wanted to feel like in plan and in section that this building takes multiple feelings, multiple planes, and multiple dimensions. You'll see that in some of the imagery. It is a discovery center, so school groups come here throughout the day. So that's its primary purpose. So there is food service, and it also handles events, not dissimilar to Grace Pavilion, which Beth just presented. You can see in the elevation, it really is a simple slope to a building with a cut through the vertical plane, and that helped with construction. A lot of the wall is glazed. And you'll see an image of this plane here, where we brought in an aluminum screen that was plasma cut and aged, so it felt like a bronze screen to reference the nature around it. So here it is. It's not just a simple box that sits within a city. It's a space that is approachable, that is well illuminated, that has that screen there. The screen cuts inside the building, so it blurs the inside and the outside, was one goal that we had. From the river itself, which is being restored, that's another part of this project, is that this river was covered up over years and years of urban design, and it's coming slowly unearthed. There's a river beneath many layers of urban aggregate. You can see the building in the background here. A close-up of the screen. I saw a lot of fascinating models and fabrication pieces downstairs. So this is something that's really great to see. I kind of do my plug now. I'm in charge of hiring in Centerbrook. So approach me and I'll hand out my card, because you guys do fantastic work here. And this is just the type of imagination that we want in Centerbrook. So there's my plug. You got to know how to build it to draw it. You don't necessarily have to build it. You're not going to build it, but you got to know how to build it when you draw it, because every line counts. And so that just expedites the process with the contractors. When you can draw and understand what the material is going to be. So congrats to you guys and what you're doing.
So we'll leave it there, but just to kind of put a bow on it, thinking about all the people are as part of the process is really the joy of the work, I think, and the people that you get to meet and the teams you get to have. And I think as architects, we are uniquely kind of honored with the role of taking really complicated things and trying to make them simple for our clients. And trying to orchestrate a really complex system and have an elegant, simple, and beautiful solution. And it makes every project different and every project exciting. So I think that's it. Thank you guys for having us.
Questions? Can you?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
Okay. Question of the audience.
I'll just start off with a little basic one. So, the research that I'm doing here is based off of lamination, and I saw that you guys use a lot of glue lam on some of your projects. So, I'm really curious what your experience, specifically with that material is like, and maybe what your attitude towards it is more of a broad scale.
Yeah, I think it's really appealing to a lot of our clients, the sustainable piece of it, but also that the finish, the structure is the finish. There's the beauty and the simplicity and the forms that you can accomplish. So it's present in a lot of projects I'm working on. I'm working with a friend's school in Bucks County, and we just designed a new gym for them, and it's a pretty modest school. But they had an old gym that was wood construction that didn't suit their needs anymore. So we were able to do a hybrid structure with the glue lam for the roof and then CLT panels, and then use steel for the vertical structure. And they were incredibly excited because they would have their wood gym, but the method, and in the Northeast, we're really lucky because there's quite a few offices that, and fabricators that we can work with. So I think we're seeing a lot of interest from our clients in using that material, and we almost are always pricing that and steel and kind of crossing our fingers that it can be competitive. And we found that it really is, especially for what you get for it.
Right, with steel, it's not just buying the steel, it's wrapping it in fire protection. So that's that cost there. So yeah, if you're doing research, you reach out to the local manufacturers, Toronto, Goodfellow. The sooner you can get to design, if you like it, talk to 3 manufacturers, and show them the design. They'll have input on it, push it. What can they do to make your design? It's not just, again, not designing a vacuum, reaching out to manufacturers for it better.
Yeah, I did a house that was all timber, and we had designed, we thought we would have to do kind of steel joinery and all the kind of bracketing and things. So we had our structural engineer design all of these. And then we went to South County Post and Beam in Rhode Island. And they said, we can do this with pegs and it'll be more affordable just because we CNC everything and it's all set up. And we're like, that's great. Like our assumption was completely wrong. So talking with the actual fabricators can open up even more possibilities than you may consider.
Thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful. And in Benai's introduction, she mentioned that your firm was founded in '75, which means you're approaching your 50th anniversary. And thank you for acknowledging Charlie Moore as one of the founding members of your firm. So that's kind of my question, is that for senior citizens like me, I've been following your firm for over 40 years. Into all of its evolution and permutations of partners. And, there's just such a wonderful evolution and legacy of your firm. And because of Charlie, your firm's been important since the beginning. You know, in other words, it's always been important, and that's why, you know, somebody like me would be paying attention to the work of the firm. So I'm really just kind of curious about his legacy for a lot of the young people here that don't know his significance in our discipline. But you know, what's it like to work in this firm today? His legacy, his spirit, is it a blessing or is it an albatross? That every day, this, you know, how much is he present ideologically in terms of your methods? I see it in themes in the work. But I'm curious about your thoughts on how your present firm and your young people are in an environment with such a legacy.
At least two founding partners just retired. One still remains that worked with Charles Moore.
They were his students, basically.
And it is, I mean, fascinating to hear how Charles Moore reacted in this meeting, or how was he during this interview, or one thing is, you know, he would talk to clients, and clients would come back and say, we don't like it, we want this or that. He'd actually like that, because again, like I mentioned earlier, if you wanted to just like the challenge of getting that information and going back to the drawing board. I think the budget of the project might suffer for it, but he liked that, and he did so well with that, because he could take in all sorts of like histories and issues with the client and create something special.
Yeah, I think, the thing I've heard that it's nothing's too precious because he's got another 10 great ideas, you know, so he was okay if he, you know, the client said this isn't the right thing, and I think
That's it. And the loose fit concept is,
Yeah.
you know, when you're in school here, everything is just right, and it does. But you have to design something so it's malleable, because you're going to get a lot of external forces saying, you have maybe you've designed something with grid, and it finally goes, no, I want it to be here. Your whole grid system blows up. So you have to be able to adjust.
And I think one of our kind of strengths at Centerbrook is we have staff in their early 20s and in their 70s, and that's wonderful. And I think it's helped me have confidence that, you know, as a relatively young principal, because I have those relationships and that opportunity. It feels almost like I would imagine like that apprenticeship was, you know, before. So I think you can learn a lot once you guys start going out there and getting jobs and stuff. You know, there's things you can learn from everyone.
Yeah, I keep a copy of A Place of Houses on my desk. And was it 6 years ago? We went to the Charles Moore reunion in Austin. And, we gave a presentation there.
If you're ever in Austin, there's a Charles Moore Foundation is in one of his houses is there.
Yeah.
Which is pretty unique guy.
So yeah,
You know,
it's work residence. So I think it's actually more popular now than 20 years ago. Definitely not.
Tyler?
Oh, yeah, hey, thanks for coming out. You for spreading the wisdom. And I was looking, and I noticed that you guys are pulling a lot of the vernacular architecture from the culture in those projects, and you're innovating. And you're doing it based off of your analysis on those cultures and a lot of what you're seeing. I'm curious on how your workflow looks like, because I'm still so early that it almost feels overwhelming to get that analysis done, and I have so much sitting in front of me, I don't know where to pursue. If it's the culture, or it's about the daylighting, or if it's about some other element that I've noticed. How do I highlight, or what does that workflow look like for you?
I think for me, I like to just collect a lot of images and stuff at the beginning, and then I just tack it up, and it's kind of next to me, and it's not so much like I'm analyzing it, it's just kind of in the air, and then you can look back at things, so things that appeal to you, and then having that concept that you can go back to, that whether it's, you know, a diagram or a whatever that concept is, it really helps you make decisions as you go along, because once you get people worrying about, you know, the water coming in and this and that, and oh, you know, it's going to get attacked from all angles. And if you go, okay, well, what's my concept and what is it serving? And as long as your concept is good and is talking to the mission, he's kind of your guide stone to try to keep it coherent throughout the process. But it's a lot of decisions. So I think if you can have a good foundation, then you can have more surety going forward.
Yeah, I think listening was a good thing. My four older siblings, two Penn Staters, I'm the youngest of five, and listening was, I think, one of my skill sets. You don't have to have the solution right after that. We have multiple large scale meetings where people are just unloading information. Just take it in, absorb it. We have different ways to extract that information, whether it's digital polling software, where we have hundreds of people's vote on Zoom live, or vote in person, or draw on maps. Take that information in, process it, and present options. Doesn't have to be one option. See what lands. We always present options.
Yeah, we like to work iteratively, so we do options, we try to make them different on purpose so that it kind of teases out that conversation. And then you get the pros and cons of each, and then you come back with a whole new set of options that kind of take that feedback, and then you just refine that until you get there.
I presented for that Cabo House 4 options. They're all got white down. So that is not the first option in the process. I didn't show it. I didn't do this, so. Yeah, show it.
So one of our students came to you as an intern and came back noticeably more confident. And when I asked about his experience with you, he said that he had, surprisingly to him, he thought he was going to be drawing windows and bathrooms in plan for the whole summer, but he was handed a task to design something very specific. You guys asked him for something like 3 options. There was back and forth, and at the end of the summer, one of them was selected and actually moved forward into a kind of construction. And he was just so surprised that someone like him could walk into your office for the summer and be trusted. And so this kind of goes to your 20-year-olds and 70-year-olds kind of span there. How is that possible at Centerbrook when that's not always the case at other kind of firms or other kind of office structures? What makes that possible, that you can trust the 19-year-old kid who comes in for the summer?
He was great. So that's fair. He's a great intern. So I will say, you should think about, your principal or whoever you're working with will give you 3 options. Hey, do these. Do a board. In your mind, you always have it. You'll see that at point of the project where you say, okay, everyone's trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out. We're nervous. We're nervous the client's going to hate our stuff. But we're all a team here. And, if you look at that earlier slide, we're all, makers trying to, make great stuff. So there's a point of a project where you can, actually, there's a lot of points of project. You can just do that extra bit of work, do that extra option, and it pays off. I think that's probably what John did.
Yeah, I think it's, part of it is in the hiring process, trying to find people that are a good fit. I think obviously being a good designer is incredibly important. We hold design at the highest level. We think of ourselves as a design firm. But being the type of person that's a self-starter is incredibly important. Pushing things forward, not backwards. Asking questions, people that take their work and then disappear, and then you have to go find them out. That's not always the best. So it's almost kind of work habits a little bit too. It's not just the product. Do you make yourself easy to work with? Are you putting things out there? I think those are important, just as important as kind of the brilliant design idea.
What really led the master planning of the Peabody Museum to really take a decade to complete, and how adventurous was Yale as a client, working with them in the design process, as a lot of museums here tend to be more form-focused leaning, and this was more of a modest, respectful approach to the vernacular. And like you guys mentioned in other projects, this dominant campus architectural style?
We, it actually wasn't a decade. It was 2 decades. My work was 7 years when I did a master plan update. It was approved by Yale and moved forward. There was a donor that gave 150 million. So he had quite a bit of say in the book. As far as Dean's council, which was Robert Stern, Caesar Pelly, Deborah Burke, who we presented that project to. And I mean, we pushed it to feel appropriate. We didn't want to design something that didn't feel seamless with Peabody itself. Being a 100-year loved institution that is visited all throughout Connecticut, people that live in Connecticut. We moved fossils, and you would hear people say, "That's not where it was when I was, 6 years old, when I came in." So it was very delicate situation, and we wanted it that way. We wanted to keep those memories of designs. But yes, it was a sensitive process where you're not only presenting this to the client, but to other architects that Yale weigh in. So
You're
Yeah,
also, yeah, you're also, a lot of our work is for, institutions, schools, museums, boards turnover, heads turnover, and what's one person's vision or pet project, the new person may have a completely different idea. So things fall apart all the time. And that's also just something you have to kind of roll with, because there's a whole kind of political, we're just one piece of the puzzle, right? They have, they're thinking about how they're gonna run it, how they're gonna endow it, how it looks optically with, I'm investing money here and not here. I mean, there's a whole world that we can just try to empathize with, but sometimes it is out of your control and it just kind of fizzles, unfortunately.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate a little bit on the village model? I saw in your slides, like when you were presenting the projects, the village model inhibit, the village model construct, but what does the village model mean for you? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think to me, I mean, we like these kind of words that you can mean lots of different things. So it could be different scales. It could be a literal village of buildings. I mean, I think every time we do a project, one of our options is called the village model, because there's something so, I think as humans, we like that type of scale, that little campus with the different pieces, and the spaces in between are just as important as the buildings themselves. So that's just something that really appeals to us. And then just thinking about all of the people and all of the players that have to be orchestrated throughout kind of, and it's not just the design, it goes forward, we may be like carrying the lead during design, but then we pass that baton. It has to keep going. And when it's inhabited by people, if it's, we like to say endearing is enduring. So if people are endeared to their spaces, it's going to last, it's going to be there, it's going to take hold. Hopefully will not be torn down in the near future. So I think it's just trying to tap into that kind of humanism element of architecture.
So you see the firms work in parallel to how a village operates, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our office is literally a village too, of different types of makers and designers and industrial designers and materials specialists.
We didn't present it that way, but we certainly have, a village that we work with within Centerbrook. We're not one name, we're not one principal's name. So it's kind of this network, this community of craftsmen and makers that come and go. So we're just one step, one cog in the wheel there. Or turbine with our water gen turbine. Like that. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.